So maybe we'll just wait for 2 more minutes and then we'll get started. So in the meantime, okay, before we get started with the technical topic, I would like to brief on this initiative, which is the demo marathon series. So normally we won't be able to cover a lot of details in a 1 hour or a 1.5 hour session, right? So because there is, even though there is an option for us to extend, we won't be able to extend much due to the limited availability of the participants or the speakers. So that is when we thought of launching the demo marathon series, where we will only be focusing on demos. And for us to complete a topic, we'll be splitting a topic across multiple sessions so that we can pay attention to every small detail around that topic. So that's the motive, and we will try our best to show you or show you whatever is very much needed, and we will try our best to communicate our message through demos. Okay, and for some certain things where we have to use the deck, we'll have to maybe 1 or 2 slides, but not more than that. And yeah, so for now we have launched 4 sessions as part of the demo marathon series, 4 pilot sessions, and based on the response we are planning to organize more sessions, and we are planning to continue the BPT series. So that is on the context. Okay, so let's quickly get started. So today's topic would be on BPT, that too, how can we start a process, and also how can we make sure to introduce a human activity to a process, how to define a process and how to trigger a process, and how to define a human activity. That will be the concept for today. So let me share my screen. I hope my screen is visible to everyone, right? And I'm not sure if the participants have. Okay, okay, yeah. Okay, great. Okay, fine. Okay, let me explain the use case first. Yeah. So, what is business process technology? Business process technology is nothing but if you have to run any logic that is going to take a very long time in an asynchronous way, which means if you typically run it via normal server action, you will get a timeout, right? Then, in those cases, you will definitely be needing something that can run asynchronously, which means you wouldn't get a timeout. So there are 2 ways, 3 ways. One is timer, the other one is process, the third one is light BPT. So we are majorly going to focus on BPT. Okay, so process is also known as BPT, and in BPT, yeah, so process is also known as BPT. Now there is one more advantage when it comes to BPT, which is you will be able to define a workflow or automate a workflow using BPT. The when we pitch customers about OutSystems platform, one of the important features that we boast about OutSystems is its process automation capability, where your process gets started and it automatically completes, and none of the existing processes or existing screens or anything wait for this process to complete. It just happens in the background. So that is BPT for you. Now, the use case that we are going to build during our demo is an expense approval process. Okay, where an employee, okay, applies for an expense report. So he submits an expense report by adding his expenses, and whatever he submits, it enters into the multiple levels of approval. The first level of approval will be his manager. Once the manager approves, then it moves to the finance team, and the finance person is the final approver. And once the finance person approves, then the expense report changes to the approved status, and it is sent to the finance team for further reimbursement. So that's the process. Now the entity or the concept that we are going to take is the expense report. So the expense report, yeah, 1 minute, let me show you another application. So this is the application which we are going to utilize, or which we are going to where we are going to implement business process technology. Okay, so I've got a comment. Okay, yeah. Yeah. So let me log into this application. Say John Mayer is an employee. I'm logging in as John Mayer. Okay. And when I click on new expense report, an expense report gets created. And then let me click on new expense report. And then when you click on new expense and you fill a form, when you fill this form and save and then submit the expense report, it moves to the submitted state. And then when it is approved by the first level approver, who is the department manager, then it reaches the processing state. And then once if the manager rejects it, then it goes to the rejected state. And when if the manager approves, sorry, after processing, if the finance person approves the expense report, then the expense report moves to the approved state. Okay. And if the finance person rejects it, then again the expense report moves to the rejected status, and the final status will be once the amount is reimbursed, it will move to the reimbursed status. Now for our today's demo, this understanding is enough. So let's quickly jump onto our demo. So I have Service Studio open. Let me open it for you. Okay, so there are two modules. One is expense portal, which has all the screens. The other one is the entity module, okay, where we have all the entities. Now, what I am going to do is I am going to define a process. Whatever I narrated now, right, which is a process, sorry, an expense report, it gets submitted, it's newly created. Now, when it is submitted, then it moves to the submitted status. When the first approver approves it, it moves to the processing status. When the second approver approves it, it moves to the approved status. So, this is the workflow that I would like to automate using BPT. So how can I get started? So this revolves around this concept called expense portal, right? Let's get started. So let me go to process tab. Let me right click. Let me add process. So why do we need BPT? Whatever I narrated, it has to be recorded somewhere in the application, right? You will have list screens, you will have detail screens with approve and reject button, but where can you understand that after this will be the step? Now it is in the first level approval status. Now it has second level approval and reimbursement phase to be, phase to be completed. So you do not have this flow defined anywhere in the application. Okay, so that is one of the major scenarios where you would need BPT plus asynchronous processing, running this process in the background. So what I want is whenever a new expense report gets created, as soon as I click on the new expense report button, let me close this. As soon as I click on the new expense report button, which we saw earlier, right, in the expense report portal screen, the new expense report button and an expense report gets created. Once the expense report gets created, I need to start or trigger a process, trigger the approval process. Okay, so that's my expectation. I don't want to explicitly call it, although you can explicitly call a process. I want to automatically trigger the process, which is the expense report approval process, as soon as an expense report gets created. So how can we do it? Let's see. I'm going to name this process as expense report. I simply created it. Now the next thing is, how can I launch this process? Okay, and I also have a detail field, description, public, launch on. So launch on is the most important property that we must know about. When should I launch this process? So either you can call this process like any other server action from another server action, okay, and this process, unlike a server action, it will run in the background. Okay, you won't get any timeout error. So that is one way of triggering this process, just simply calling it from a server action. The other way is automatically triggering it. Now, what I want is, as soon as an expense report gets created, I want to launch this process. So click on this drop down, click on another event. Here, I can only see create user and create rule. I don't see create expense report. Why? The reason is, you need to enable a property called expose process events for that entity to trigger events whenever an expense report gets created. So we are speaking about expense report, right? So go to expense report, go to indexes and more, and here click on more options, enable this option, expose process event. If it is set to true, creating or updating entity records issues events to process. Okay, close this, publish this. Now, after this, when we refresh dependencies in the expense portal end user module, you will be able to see create expense report as one of the events in the launch on property. Go here and let's refresh the dependencies, apply. Okay. Now click on the process, go to launch event. As you can see, create expense report. Okay, so whenever a new expense report gets added to the expense report entity, this process gets triggered. And detail, it's nothing but a proper description about this process. So let's say expense approval process. Okay, then expose process entity. I'll come to this part later. Okay, let's publish. In the meantime, let me open service center. Okay, this has been successfully published. Now I would like to see the process from service center. That's my motive. So let's see it. So go to the module expense portal, click on processes log. You will see there is one process called expense report approval, and there is zero suspended instance, zero active instance, zero active instance with error, because we have not run the process yet, right? The process is not triggered yet. So go open the process. There is no instance for this process. Instance in the sense, when you first when you create an expense report for the first time, an instance of expense report approval process is triggered, and third time another instance runs. That's what you mean by instance. Currently it says no items to show. Okay, let's go back to process monitoring. Now what we will do, we will open this application in browsers. Let's create an expense report. We already have this open, right? So let's create an expense report. Let me click on new expense report. So only when I click on new expense report, okay. Let me click on new expense report. Okay, expense report ID 77. Okay. Now let's go to the process monitoring tab. Let's refresh the screen. Okay, 1 minute. 1 minute, guys. Have I published? Yeah. Create expense report. Yeah, right. We go to the, let me show you in expense report screen. New expense report on click. This is where I'm creating an expense report, right? So this is where I'm creating an expense report. Okay. Let's refresh. Okay, let's go back 1 minute. It's fine. Okay. Let me create an expense firstly. Expense report, expose read only, indexes and property, more options, expose. Yep. 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 Absolutely. Okay, let's do one thing for time being. Let's just continue. I'll refresh the screen and let's try it. It should be visible in some time. So in merchant tab, I'll say something like Amazon. So I'm creating an expense 1500. Description will be say hmm, virtual cloud. Okay, let me save this expense. Okay, now you add an expense, and when you click on submit report, you'll be asked to fill a manager. You'll be asked to choose a manager. I have chosen a manager. Let me click on submit. Okay, so I've successfully submitted an expense report, and it was submitted only today, right? From what I remember. No, no, not this one. I have too many expense reports. Okay. Yeah, this is the one that I have recently submitted. I am in expense report approval screen. Let me open it. As you can see here, let me go back to process monitoring. Okay, not sure. Okay, guys, one more thing. Why was I not able to see 00? Because active in the sense whatever the process that is currently active, okay, which is currently running. In our case, a process started when I click on the new expense report. Okay, but it ended soon. Let me show you. Open the process. I created two times, right? The first time when I simply click on new expense report. The second time I clicked on new expense report and I added an expense, right? So two processes got created when I clicked on the new expense report button. Now, if I open 472, okay, so if you see here, it started, it ended. Let me show you one more time. So I'll go here. If I click on new expense report, the process starts. I won't be able to see this in the active instances. The reason being it just runs and ends soon. Okay, so let me refresh this. Can you see another instance has started 474 and it started, it ended. Okay, start, closed, end, closed. So every activity here in process, it's called a this is a start activity, this is an end activity. So every activity has a started status and a closed status. Okay, open and closed status. Okay, that's what you are getting to see here, and this lasted for 1 second. Okay, now what we will do, let's move on to the next step. The next step is when I click on new expense, I need to fill the form and then I need to submit the expense report, right? So that's the next activity. So let's add the activity for it. So when an expense report created, it gets created in the new state. Next, what is the next thing? It should move to the submitted status, right? How will it move? Will it move automatically, or does anyone have to fill a form or do something in the UI? The answer, it's not automatically submitted. As an end user, I need to go to the form. I need to go to the form. I need to click on new expense and I need to fill this form and then submit it, right? So that's the process. So go to Service Studio. Let's drag and drop. So this is a human activity, right? An end user has to do something. So I'll say submit the report. Okay, this is the next human activity. But before that, as soon as you chose the launch on property to create expense report, automatically you will get an input parameter added to the process. I did not add it, it automatically got added. Okay, so whatever the expense report that gets created, its id is automatically received as an input parameter to the process. Okay, now the next thing is I need to submit the report. So who has to submit the report? Now, a human activity has these many properties: name, description, label, public, user. User is nothing but who has to perform this activity. The answer is it is the same person who created this expense report. So go to expression editor I've got an ID, right? What I'm going to do is I am going to fetch the ID of the person who created this expense report with ID, expense report ID. So I'll go to the expense report entity. There will be a get entity action, get the expense report with ID, expense report ID, whatever I have got, okay, for which this process is running, okay. And then I don't want the entire record. I only want the ID of the person who created this expense report. That's all. So this is the person whoever clicked on the new button, new expense report button. The same person should click on submit, right? So that's why I'm defining this, defining the user to be this person. Close on. This is a very important property. If you don't understand the other properties, it's okay, but you have to understand what close on is. So I showed you, right? Every activity has an open status and a closed status. Now, when can I consider this human activity submit the report as closed, or when can I consider this activity as completed? When the expense report changes to the submitted status, that is when I can consider this activity as completed or done, right? So let's define the close on property. Close on property is nothing but close on event will be an update event when the expense report, when this expense report, that's why in ID you have to pass the ID of the expense report ID, because I don't want the, if any other expense report changes to submitted, I don't want to end this activity. No, when the expense report for which this process was triggered, when its status changes to submitted, then I can consider this activity as completed. So ID is fine. You have to configure the report status part. So the status has to be changed to submitted. Only then you can consider this activity as completed. Okay. This in our case and most probable, most scenarios, it's the status that we will be monitoring. Okay. For every activity completion. So if then status moves to this, then it means it's completed. Okay. Then destination, we will come to destination tomorrow when I define about, when I teach you about task box, detail instructions. Due date is nothing but, say for example, when a new expense report gets created, it has to be submitted within, say, 1 day or 2 days. In that scenario, you can very well configure a due date. Okay, for time being, I won't be able to show this. Okay, but in a real time scenario, if you say that you send a link, password reset link to someone, and it will they have to activate the account in 2 days, then you have to set due date, and example due date will be from today, add 2 days. Okay, so you have built-in functions with which you can add days. Okay, two. So due date will be 2 days from today. Okay, before which this activity has to be completed, otherwise this activity will be cancelled. Okay, then roles. Who can submit a report? Who can submit an expense report? It can be an employee, it can be a manager. Even manager is an employee, right? And a finance team, anyone can submit. So I'll keep the roles as such. Then allow skip. Can this activity be skipped? In this case, I can't. There is no way that an expense report be moved to the submitted status other than this way. There is no other way. The end user has to sit, has to fill the expense and submit. Only then this will move to the submitted stage. There is no other way. Okay, where UI is fine. Otherwise, in the back end, maybe with this logic, it will automatically get submitted. In that case, this activity can be skipped because the expense report will automatically change to submitted by some other way, but not via this human activity, but with something else. In that case, I can skip this activity. In my case, no, it can't be skipped. There is this own way, one way. So I'm going to set allow skip property as no. Start date is nothing but this activity will be active from the moment I publish. From the moment I publish. But if you want this activity to be available only after a day, say I have created an expense report, only after a day I should give the capability to add expenses to that expense report. Okay, in that case you can set the start date, but for now I'll keep it as such. The reason being I need to show you this right away. So let's publish. Go back, refresh. Let me create a new expense report. Currently there are how many instances? 3 instances. Now I'm going to create a new expense report. So the instances will increase to 4. Okay. Let me open the latest instance. It is active, right? The latest instance is active. Yeah, status is ready, not open. Now it started and it moved to the next activity, which is submit the report activity. Okay, and who has to submit it? John Mayer, who was the one who created the report, he has to submit it. It is ready. Okay, now I'll go here. Let me fill this form. And then, yeah, in the meantime, I'll also show you the active instances tab. Can you see active instance is 1? There is one process that is currently running. Okay. Then let me click on submit report. Let me choose a manager. Let's wait for it. Mary Jane, submit. So as soon as I submit, let's see what happens. Let me refresh, submit the report. It's closed now because I submitted it, right? And this activity lasted for 93 seconds. And now it has ended. Okay, so this is the basic mindset that you have to understand when you are learning BPT. Since we have 3 more minutes, I'll quickly add or define the remaining human activities. The next human activity will be first level approval. Now, who has to perform first level approval? So I chose a manager, right? So that person has to complete this activity. So user will be nothing but so go to the expense report, get the expense report record, and there is a property called first approver. So as soon as I choose a manager from the drop down, the first approver field gets updated automatically. So the manager who I chose, right? That person has to perform this activity. And when should I consider this as closed? So when the expense report moves from the submitted state to the processing state. When it moves to processing state, I can consider the expense report as I mean, I can consider this activity as completed. Now, who can perform this? Not a registered user, not just an employee, only a manager can perform this activity. That's why I'm enabling checking this alone. Because a finance person, although he has the finance role, he can very well submit an expense report, right? So that's why in the previous time I did not define anything. I set all the roles, but here there is a restriction. Similarly, I'll define the second level approval. Second level approval will be by finance team and anyone from the finance team. It's not like I will choose a finance person. No, I won't. Okay, and if I show you in the application, you won't choose a finance person. Anybody who belongs to the finance team can approve the expense report. So that's the case. So I'll keep the user field empty. Close on property will be again update expense report. Now, when can I consider this activity as closed? When the expense report status changes to approved. Now here, this is the most important part. Here I need to check the finance team role. So anyone, okay, anyone with the finance team role can perform the second level approval, can perform the second level human activity. With this, we are done. I'll show you the output. With that, we'll wrap today's session. Okay, expense reports. Let me click on new expense report. As soon as I clicked on it, a new expense report has got added. Oh yeah, okay, publish is started. Okay, now let me add an expense or two. Merchant would be Google. Say save, submit. Oh yeah, let's wait for this drop down to load. Actually, this application uses the deprecated version of drop down search. That's why we are getting this inconvenience. Let's wait. Submit. Okay, I've submitted the report. Let's see. 478. First level approval, it is ready, right? Let me log in as a manager now. Let me log out. Let me log in as, I believe I chose Mary Jane. I see this. This is the one. Open this and approve the expense. As soon as I approve it, it was ready, right? Now this is closed. Then it's the second level approval. For the second level approval, I did not choose a specific person, right? So I log in as the finance person, Elton. And in here, I have this expense report. Once I click on approve expense, it is also successfully approved. Let's refresh, and that activity is also successfully closed and the activity is ended. Okay, and there is a due date that I defined in the due date property. That's why it also displays the due date. For others, there isn't any due date. It's available forever for anyone to complete. With this, we are wrapping today's session. I hope the session was useful to all of you. Let's meet tomorrow for the next part, which is the task box section. Okay. Thank you. And the recording will be uploaded in the Chennai OutSystems User Group official channel, and it will be available in the events page by tomorrow. Thank you.